actually thought I was accursed. I was just like, no, this
Mhm,
ain't normal, right?
mhm,
So I found myself in Georgia, and I had this little stint where things were doing really good. I was employed, gainfully employed. I was making moves, and then all of a sudden it came to a complete halt. And I couldn't understand why. It was circumstances beyond my control, but there was plenty of
mm,
work to do in Georgia. I was literally a licensed attorney in good standing, but it was this culmination, this reminder, and I feel like that reminder was on purpose now, that you're vulnerable, that at any given point you can find yourself at the mercy of someone who doesn't like you, whether that's based off
mm.
of personal vendetta or based off of racism or a combination of all of them. And that your happy go lucky, circumstantial resources and abundance, it can all come to a complete halt by means that you have no control over. And that is exactly what happened. I was completely had the carpet pulled from under me. And then I just couldn't understand why. But I knew that I had what it took. I mean, I wasn't just going to sit back and get, put out and have my child, on, not that being on welfare is a bad thing, but I didn't want to be in that position
Right.
where I was dependent upon, someone for food, clothing, and shelter to that degree. And so I did the only logical thing that I could do. I started applying for jobs outside of Georgia. It seemed like Georgia had closed the window
Mm,
of every job. Like nobody was giving me a job. And the bills were piling up, and I was struggling to figure out, well, do I buy a pack of beans, or do I pay the electric bill? Should I put gas in the car? My son's got the sniffles. Do I get him some medicine? And I got this $10 and it's got to do 10 things for me for the next 30 days. And so that was what you call a personal crisis. It wasn't affecting everybody. In fact,
mhm.
it looked like it was only impacting me. But my world was coming to a complete and total halt, and it was crumbling fast. And all of the people kept saying, oh, go to this resource or go to that resource. They'll help you. They'll help you. Oh, you should be able to qualify for this. When you're in that, none of that works.
Mm,
None of it works. You go, you apply for this, and they say, "Oh, but you're you work. You just it happened just 3 days ago. Why don't you just go apply for a job? Why don't you open a business?" I mean, the blocks that just popped up time after time again, it was absurd. It was enough to make you go insane. So I applied for a job in North Carolina, and they brought me on. And I thought, as I was driving on Sunday nights, every night I would leave my son in my home. It was extremely excruciating at midnight because I didn't want to leave him. So I would hold on to the very last minute, and I would be admonishing him, if you're going to be here, baby, you don't want to go with your dad's house because they won't let you go to after school programs. But if you're going to be here, you can't go to sleep with the stove on. Only microwave, please. And don't forget to lock the door. And it was like you're
mm,
leaving. I could only imagine what our ancestors went through when their children were ripped from them, because although my circumstances were nothing like that, it was
mm.
the most gut-wrenching and terrifying experience. But it was either that or lose everything. So I would get in the car and I would drive, and it was the most excruciating drive, weekend after weekend. And I would get there on Monday morning just in time to log into work, and nobody knew I was dealing with this. And so I would leave Sunday night, get there Monday, and then there was the issue, well, where in the world am I going to stay? Because nobody wanted to help me
Oh.
that I knew in North Carolina. And I had literally I had a girlfriend, and she slammed the door in my face, and she's like, no, I've got a man, you're not staying here. But what she did do was she gave me the phone number to a couple. Now, I was terrified. I had never stayed with anyone before. But the moment I walked into this couple's home, they were a Mormon couple. They were in Huntersville, North Carolina. And the moment I walked in, I was relieved because I knew it was going to be okay, that I was
Mm,
going to make it. So I walked in, and there was my room and the bathroom and the kitchen. I didn't have to interact with anyone. Just get in, get your rest, and leave, right? And so one day I was in the laundry room, and above my head, I saw this box, and this box had the word emergency preparedness on it. And I was completely intrigued by that. I'd go on about my day. And then one day the lady who owned the home was there. And I said, Amberly, can you tell me what this means? Like, it just stayed with me all day. Like, what is this? I had never seen anything like that before. And she said, oh, that's my emergency preparedness box. And she's like, we're Mormon. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And she said, oh,
Yeah.
well, we're Mormons. We have to be prepared for an emergency. And I was like, what do you mean? Come again, come again. Like, I'm not making the connection. Explain a little bit for me. And she's like, okay, Sheila, we're Mormon. It's part of our religious beliefs that you have to have food, water, emergency supplies, and everything you need to sustain your family for 1 year at minimum in order to be a good Mormon.
Oh, okay.
And I'm saying to myself, wow, that is the bizarrest thing I have ever heard in my life. Certainly,
Mm-hmm.
I could see the benefit of all people in the world of having a little bit of beans, some water to drink, some emergency medicine for when my son decided of all times he never got sick that he was going to catch the worst flu in Georgia. And it resonated with me because it made so much sense. If I had had a couple of cans of extra food or some dried beans or just, 3 months of food to sustain me instead of living day to day, week
Yeah.
to week, and just taking for granted that I would always be able to go to the grocery store. I would always have what I needed. So that still unsettled my soul because I'm like, I'm hearing some new concepts that I never heard before. And any other time it would have just rolled off of my head. But here I am. I've been brought down to a complete state of emergency.
Mm.
I'm brought down to my knees. I literally had gone to a church and I was humiliated by this old woman who had blonde hair, and she was a part of this church, and she said, what do you spend on groceries every week? Now, I didn't have the sense enough to know that I didn't have a budget, so I gave her a number that she found completely offensive. And no one had taught me even up to that point about budgeting and finances. So what I really should have said to her was that over the course of a month, I might spend $400. And that would include not just groceries, but my laundry detergent and my detergents and my soaps and hygiene. But what I said to this lady was so offensive that she sent me packing. Like, oh, you live a luxurious lifestyle. I'm not giving you my church's money and you need to grow some chickens. Chickens? Like, I was like, okay, Heavenly One, whatever I have done in this life to offend you, I'm asking for forgiveness because this is not okay. So I was being humiliated, having to be in the soup line, right? And I'm an attorney. And I'm like, why am I going through this? Well, sometimes you are brought down to such a low place because you will only see a lesson that is going to be put before you in a way that it will resonate with you and make sense in a way that you're supposed to act on and transform the way others are doing business if you were in this place. So had I been, having my money and my little car and all of my needs met, I would have never met Amberly.
That's right.
By no circumstances. I would have never been intrigued by the emergency essentials box, and I would have never had an opportunity to ask that question, and I would have never been confronted at a most pivotal time in my life with the reality of not being prepared. Because preparedness, you don't get caught up in whether it's apocalyptic level preparedness or if it's just a personal health crisis preparedness. Preparedness encompasses all of the potential scenarios. And I was certainly someone who was in no position to laugh at her seeing my predicament at the time. So I ended up leaving there, and eventually, ironically, as soon as I got that epiphany, everything seemed to fall back in order. I went back to Georgia. I ended up shifting my focus back to DC. I came back to DC, and here it was January the 23rd in the middle of Snowmageddon, my son's birthday. He's turned 18 years old, and I'm over 300 pounds, and I'm miserable with life, and I had to confront all of that. And I'm saying to myself, what in the world was that about? Nawapia Nation, rejection, law school, Troy Anthony Davis. Is like your life flashing before your eyes. And then I start the journey, the real journey. I had been in hell and purgatory, picking up all these lessons, gathering the jewels, because it was time for me to start building the castle. So the emergency preparedness came out of real lived experience. And it was followed up because once I got back to DC, I started really resonating on what was said. I started really paying attention to the unprecedented insight that I don't think very many Black women would get, to be in the home of a Mormon couple who was living this. See, what people don't know about the Mormons is they were and are the minority among the religious Western Anglo-Saxon Protestant theologies and Catholicism, the two. So they were the Negro of the white religious institutional system. So having that experience, they learned three very important things. One, that when it's time for scarcity of resources, the people on the bottom of the totem pole don't get fed, they get fed on. Two, regardless of how good a group of people are, no matter what their commonalities are, when it comes to the dire need for what Maslow referred to as the three hierarchy of needs, food, clothing, and shelter being the first run, your mother, neighbor, brother, and sister become your chief and most prominent enemy. When hunger is on the table, the people who are closest to you are more of a threat to you than the people who are your institutional, theoretical, and ethnic enemy.